I was reaching for my blood pressure medication on the top shelf of the bathroom cabinet when my foot caught the edge of the bath mat, and I went down hard. That's it. No dramatic fall down the stairs, no slipping on ice. Just a bath mat and a Tuesday morning in November, and then I was on the tile floor of my bathroom in Guelph, Ontario, my right hip on fire, my shoulder jammed against the vanity, and my phone sitting on the nightstand in the next room. I lay there for what felt like a long time. Long enough for the baseboard heater to click on and off twice. Long enough for the neighbor's dog to start barking and stop. I called out once, but my windows were sealed for winter. November in Ontario means sealed windows. My daughter had a key. She lived 40 minutes away in Mississauga. I'd given her the key 3 years ago when my husband Frank passed, told her to keep it just in case. I thought about that key the whole time I was on the bathroom floor. The paramedics got there because my mail carrier, a young man named Tobias who'd been doing our street for 6 years, noticed my front door had been open an inch in 5-degree weather and knocked until he heard me. Tobias. I didn't even know his last name. At the hospital, the emergency nurse asked for my emergency contact. I gave her my daughter's name and number. She called. No answer. She called again 30 minutes later. No answer. The surgical coordinator called twice more before they took me in. 17 calls over 2 days. My daughter never picked up once. I went into surgery for a fractured hip thinking she'd be there when I woke up. She wasn't. Before I tell you who was, I want to ask something. If you've ever made excuses for someone who kept letting you down, if you've ever told yourself they're just busy, they'll come through when it really matters, keep listening. This story is for you. And if stories about family loyalty mean something to you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Granite Revenge. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or province in the comments. Now let me tell you what happened. I'm 66 years old. I grew up in Kitchener, moved to Guelph when Frank and I got married in 1983. We raised our daughter Nadia in a red brick semi on a quiet street with a Norway maple in the front yard that turned orange every October like it was showing off. Frank worked for the city. I was a registered nurse at Guelph General for 31 years. We weren't wealthy people, but we were solid. We owned the house outright. We had RRSPs, a modest TFSA, a small pension coming to me. We had a good life. Frank died of a second heart attack on a Sunday morning in March, 4 years ago. The first one, 2 years before, had scared us into changing everything. The diet, the walks, the medication. We thought we bought time. We hadn't. He went fast, in the kitchen, before the ambulance arrived. I was holding his hand. Nadia flew in from Mississauga. She and her husband Colin stayed 4 days. On the 5th day, Colin had a thing at work he couldn't postpone and Nadia went back with him. I understood. She had her own life. Her son, my grandson Aidan, was 7 years old and had hockey and school and all the things 7-year-olds have. I wasn't going to be a burden. But I was 62 and newly alone in a house I'd lived in for 37 years, and the silence after Frank was a different kind of quiet than I'd ever known. It had weight. It sat on the other side of the bed, and at the kitchen table and in the car on the passenger side. I kept going. I did what Frank would have wanted. I tended the garden. I walked every morning along the Speed River Trail. I kept my shifts at the food bank on Saturdays. I was not a woman who fell apart, but slowly, without my quite noticing it, my daughter drifted. The first year, she called every Sunday. The second year, every couple of weeks. By the third year, I was always the one calling, and even then I could feel her listening with half her attention, the sound of her life going on around her. Colin's voice in the background. Aidan's TV. The particular politeness people use when they're waiting for a conversation to end. I told myself she was busy. Colin's contracting business had taken off. Nadia had gone back to work in property management. Aidan was in 2 hockey leagues and had started guitar. People's lives expand. I knew that. What I didn't let myself know was that mine had stopped mattering to them. 8 months before my fall, my daughter called on a Wednesday afternoon. Nadia never called in the middle of the week. My heart did something embarrassing when I saw her name on the screen. She was friendly, chatty even. Asked how I was sleeping, whether the furnace had been serviced, whether I'd thought about the logistics of the house long term. That phrase, long term, I asked what she meant. Well, she said, it's a lot of house for one person. The neighborhood's gone up a lot since you and Dad bought in. Mrs. Oleski's place 2 doors down listed at 780 and sold in 4 days. You're sitting on a significant asset, Mum. I told her it was my home. Of course it is, she said, and changed the subject. I hung up and stood in my kitchen for a while. Then I told myself I was reading too much into it. She was just thinking about my future. That's what children do. I keep doing that in this story, telling myself reasonable things that turned out not to be true. The person who was there when I woke up from surgery was a woman named Harriet. Harriet Osei, 51 years old, who I had not seen in person in almost 3 years, though we spoke on the phone every few weeks. She was sitting in the vinyl chair beside my bed with a Tim Hortons cup going cold on the tray table and dark circles under her eyes. She'd driven up from Hamilton the night before. I made some kind of sound when I came around, and she was on her feet instantly. "You're awake." She took my hand. Her grip was warm and certain. I tried to speak. My throat was like gravel. She held a straw to my lips. "Water. Sip slow." "How did you know?" I managed. "Tobias," she said. "He found your neighbor Doreen's number on the inside of your front door. The little emergency list we made together. Remember? Doreen called me. Doreen was 81 years old and used a walker. Harriet lived 90 minutes away. Neither of them was my daughter." "Nadia," I said. Harriet's face did something careful. "The hospital's been trying her. They couldn't reach her." I closed my eyes. "How long?" "You've been out for almost 20 hours. Surgery went well. Hips pinned. You'll need physio, but you'll walk fine." I lay there listening to the monitors. Then I said, "Is she traveling?" Harriet was quiet for a moment. "I didn't know the answer to that," she said carefully. So I looked. She turned her phone to show me my daughter's Instagram page. Public, because Nadia had always loved an audience. The most recent post was from that morning. She and Colin at a steakhouse in downtown Toronto. Candlelight, wine glasses, Colin in a blazer. The caption read, "Date night because we work hard and we deserve it. Just us. No mom guilt, no obligations. Present." Posted 11 hours after I went into surgery. Present. I read that word twice. I was in a hospital bed with a fractured hip, and my daughter was posting about being present. I scrolled down without being able to stop myself. A hotel lobby somewhere, a spa receipt on a marble counter. Colin and Nadia at what looked like a wine tasting, both of them laughing with their eyes closed. Each post time stamped across the previous 48 hours. They had full service. They had Wi-Fi. They were documenting their lives in real time while the hospital called 17 times, and I came out of anesthesia alone. No obligations, I read again. I had become an obligation. I gave the phone back to Harriet. She set it face down on the tray table. "I'm so sorry," she said. I closed my eyes again. But I couldn't unfeel those words. No obligations, just us. At some point, without my realizing it, I had been reclassified, not as Nadia's mother, as a task she'd earned a break from. Harriet stayed for 4 days. She slept in that vinyl chair the first night, and then convinced a kind nurse to bring a cot. She went to my house, fed my cat Chester, picked up my mail, brought back clean clothes and my own pillow, and the novel I'd been reading. She sat with me through the physio assessment, took notes, asked the questions I was too foggy to think of. She made me eat. I had met Harriet 22 years ago when she was a single mother, 29 years old, admitted to my floor after a car accident on the 401. Both legs broken, her 4-year-old daughter uninjured only because of the car seat. She had no family in Canada. Her parents were still in Ghana. She was terrified and in pain and completely alone, and something about the way she refused to cry, jaw set, eyes fierce, reminded me of something I recognized. I stayed late that week. I brought her daughter coloring books from the gift shop. I made sure her placement paperwork went to someone I trusted. I called her when she was discharged, just to check in. I went to her daughter's kindergarten graduation, her own graduation when she finished her dental hygiene program 4 years later, the opening of the practice she eventually built in Hamilton. You didn't have to do any of this, she told me once. You were just my nurse. You were never just a patient, I said. Now here she was, 22 years later, on a cot in room 14 of the orthopedic ward, because my own daughter had posted Instagram stories about deserving a break. On the third day, two things happened. My neighbor Doreen came by, brought shortbread she'd made herself, and set it on my tray table with the specific purposefulness of someone who has something to say and is working up to it. We talked about the street, about her son's new baby, about the Norway maple that had to come down last spring. Then she folded her hands. Margaret, she started, then caught herself. Sorry. Old habit. My name is Louise, I told her. Louise, she said, a few months back, around August, your daughter called me. I went still. We'd never spoken much, Doreen and I. Friendly wave over the fence, that kind of neighborly relationship. She said she was just checking in, catching up. Then she started asking questions. Whether I seemed forgetful lately. Whether I'd left the stove on, or confused appointments, or seemed unsteady on my walks. She asked if I'd fallen recently. The shortbread sat between us. I told her you were sharp as a tack, Doreen said. I told her you'd reminded me about my flu shot 2 weeks in a row because I kept forgetting. She seemed, and here she paused, choosing the word carefully, disappointed. After Doreen left, I sat with that word. Disappointed. My daughter had been hoping to hear that her mother was slipping. 2 hours later, my friend Paulette from the food bank arrived with a container of soup and a worried look. We'd known each other for 8 years, Paulette and I, ever since I started volunteering on Saturdays. She was 70, retired from teaching, funny in the dry way that Francophone Ontarians sometimes are. After the soup and the news about the food bank, she too went quiet. I got a call, she said, back in September, from a woman who said she was your daughter. She asked the same questions. Was I forgetful? Had I seemed confused? Had I mentioned any falls? I told her you ran the Saturday inventory like a drill sergeant and always caught the discrepancies I missed. She said she was just being proactive about your care. 2 calls, I thought. 2 friends, same questions, same careful concern. A few months apart, building a case I hadn't known was being built. After Paulette left, Harriet came back from the cafeteria and sat down, and I watched her face, and I knew there was something she hadn't shown me yet. She reached into the tote bag she'd brought from my house. I found something in your mailbox when I picked up your things. I didn't know when to give it to you. Maybe now. It was a large envelope, thick. Return address, Mill Pond Gardens, Retirement and Memory Care, Cambridge, Ontario. I opened it with fingers that weren't quite steady. A brochure, the kind with soft focus photos of smiling older adults in bright common rooms, jigsaw puzzles and watercolor classes, and a dining room with cloth napkins. Tucked inside was a partially filled intake assessment form. Patient name, Louise Garneau. Age, 66. Checkboxes marked. Cognitive decline. History of falls. Unable to manage independently. Family-initiated placement. Every box checked. Every box a lie. The family contact section had been filled in by hand. My daughter's name. Her phone number. Her handwriting. The postmark was dated 9 days before I fell. I read it twice. Then I put it down on the blanket over my lap and looked at the window. Outside, a seagull was walking along the ledge in the grey November light, the indifferent, unhurried way seagulls do. She'd been building this before I fell, Harriet said quietly. The calls to your friends. This form. She was creating a paper trail. The pieces slid into place with a kind of terrible precision. The call about property values. The questions to Doreen and Paulette about cognitive decline. The intake form with every damaging box ticked, mailed to my address 9 days before my accident. This wasn't concern for my welfare. It was architecture. Build the case that Louise is declining, get her placed, free up the house. And when I actually fell and fractured my hip, they didn't see a crisis. They saw a gift. An elderly woman with a fresh fracture, fresh hospital records, a history of falls now real instead of fabricated. They could let the medical system do the work while they sipped wine in Toronto. They hadn't counted on Tobias or Doreen or Harriet or 31 years of nursing that had taught me exactly how these systems worked. I picked up my phone and called the lawyer who'd handled Frank's estate. Her name was Miss Ped, Adenike Obi, and she had an office on Wyndham Street in Guelph, and she was not the kind of person you wanted on the other side of a legal matter. I need to come in, I told her. As soon as I'm discharged, and I need to talk to you about a power of attorney and a new will. I was discharged 11 days after surgery. Harriet drove me. I had a walker and a list of physio exercises and a paper bag of medications. And I sat in the passenger seat watching the winter fields go by on the 401 and felt, beneath the pain and the exhaustion, something clear and cold and purposeful. I met with Ms. Obi 8 days later. My hip ached in the hard chair, but I didn't ask for a cushion. I walked her through everything: the phone calls to Doreen and Paulette, the intake form, the Instagram posts, the 17 unanswered calls. She listened without interrupting, made notes in a narrow hand. Then she talked me through my options. In Ontario, I could assign a new power of attorney, removing Nadia immediately and naming Harriet instead. I could update my will. I could create a formal record of my cognitive competency now, preemptively, so that any future attempt to challenge my capacity would run into a neuropsychological evaluation with a timestamp. I'll do all of it, I said. She also suggested one more thing. Given what I'd found, she recommended I document the intake form and the phone calls formally, in case I ever needed them. I want her to know. I know, I said. Is there a way to do that? Miss Obi, to do that. Miss Obi looked at me over her reading glasses. There's a way to do everything, she said. The cognitive evaluation took place the following week at Guelph General. An hour of tests with a neuropsychologist who, when it was over, shook my hand and said my results were in the top quartile for my age group. I thought of the checked boxes on the intake form. Cognitive decline. Unable to manage independently. Lies. All of them lies. My daughter called 3 weeks after my fall. I'd been home for 10 days by then, managing the stairs with the walker, doing my exercises twice a day, eating soup Harriet had portioned into containers and stocked in my freezer. Mum, oh my God, I just saw all these messages. Your phone must have... Why didn't anyone call Colin's number? They did, I said, 17 times combined, over 2 days. Silence. We were in a no-service area, a cottage up near Parry Sound. There was literally no signal. You posted on Instagram 14 times. That was. The Wi-Fi at the cottage was patchy. Those must have queued and posted when we got back to the city. I didn't say anything. I feel terrible, Mum. I'm coming this weekend. I'll bring Aidan. He's been asking about you. Fine, I said. Come Saturday. They arrived Saturday at noon without Aidan. He'd woken up with a cold, Colin said. Couldn't risk it with your hip recovery. They stayed for 50 minutes. Nadia walked through each room of my house in the particular way people do when they're calculating, pausing at the kitchen window with its view of the backyard, commenting on how the neighborhood had filled in, how the houses on the street had kept their value. Colin mentioned twice that the market was slow right now, but a well-maintained property in this part of Guelph would move fast when the time was right. When the time was right, I watched my son-in-law stand in my kitchen discussing real estate timing, and I felt something settle into place in my chest, cold and final as a deadbolt. Before they left, I mentioned that Miss Obi had reached out about updating my documents after the health scare. Standard practice, she'd said, after any significant medical event. Colin's expression shifted. Just a fraction. Just enough. That makes sense, my daughter said. Very sensible. When? Wednesday. 2 o'clock. We'll be there, she said. They were pulling out of the driveway before Colin's car had fully warmed up. I watched from the front window, and I saw my daughter on her phone before they'd even reached the corner. I had asked Harriet to be at Miss Obi's office at 1:45. Wednesday was clear and cold, the kind of Ontario December day where the light comes in low and sharp and makes everything look very precise. I wore the green wool blazer Frank had given me for our 30th anniversary Because if I was going to do this thing, I was going to do this thing, I was going to do it as myself. Miss backed. Obie's office smelled like good coffee and old paper. Harriet was already there when I arrived, in her good coat, her reading glasses on a chain around her neck. We sat down and waited. Nadia and my son-in-law arrived at 2 on the dot, both of them dressed like the meeting was a formality. Nadia in a camel blazer, Colin in his good jacket, ready to receive good news. They stopped when they saw Harriet. "What is she doing here?" Colin said. "I invited her," I said. "Sit down." Nadia looked at her husband. "This is a family matter, Mum. Harriet is family. More than either of you have been in 4 years. Sit down." They sat. The room was very quiet. I didn't look at Miss Obie. I told her I needed to speak first. "I know about the calls," I said. My daughter's face was still. "What calls? You called Doreen?" "You asked her if I seemed confused." "Forgetful. Unsteady. You called Paulette at the food bank. Same questions." Building a picture. Nadia opened her mouth. "I was worried about you living alone." I reached into my bag and set the intake form on the desk between us. "Mill Pond Gardens," I said. "Cambridge. Family-initiated placement. Every box checked. History of falls. Cognitive decline. Unsafe to live independently. Your handwriting, your phone number, mailed to my address 9 days before I fell." The color in my daughter's face changed. Colin was very still. "It was just research," Nadia said finally. "In case something happened. You're alone. You're 66. I just wanted to be prepared." "You checked the box for cognitive decline," I said. "I passed a neuropsychological evaluation in the top quartile for my age group last week. That documentation is attached to my new will." She looked at the table. Colin looked at the window. "While I was in surgery," I continued, "you posted 14 times on social media. Date night. No obligations. Present. The hospital called 17 times. Not once did you pick up. Your father is 4 years gone, and in 4 years you've asked me twice how I actually was. You came here last Saturday and spent 50 minutes talking about property values. I have not mattered to you for a long time. Maybe I never mattered to you the way I thought I did." I paused. "What I know is this. You were not planning for my care. You were planning for my removal. There was a difference, and I know exactly what that difference looks like." Miss Obie opened the file. She read out the will, clearly and without drama. "To my grandson Aidan, a registered education savings plan of $80,000, administered by Harriet Osei as trustee, with no parental access until Aidan reaches the age of majority. The money will be there for him regardless of anything else that happens in this family. To Harriet Osei, $65,000 in recognition of the kind of friendship that shows up without being asked. To the Guelph Food Bank, $40,000. To Guelph General Hospital's palliative care ward, where I worked for 6 years at the end of my career, $35,000 in Frank Garneau's name. To Tobias, my mail carrier, I had asked Miss Obie to help me set up a small respite for his daughter, whose name I'd finally learned. $5,000, enough to start something. To Nadia and Colin, nothing. My son-in-law spoke first. His voice was controlled, but only just. "You're giving away everything. I'm giving it to the people who were there. You'll regret this," Nadia said. Her voice was different now. Thin. "When you're older and you actually need help and there's no one." She stopped, because she must have heard it herself. The shape of the threat she was making. I looked at my daughter. I had looked at her thousands of times in her life. When she was born, when she was 7 and lost her first tooth, when she left for university, when she married Colin in a June wedding in the backyard of this same house. I knew her face completely. I didn't know this version of it. "I needed help 6 weeks ago," I said. "I was on my bathroom floor for almost an hour. Then I was in surgery for 3 hours. The person who drove up from Hamilton at 9 o'clock at night was Harriet. The person who knocked on my door in 5-degree weather was a mail carrier who barely knew my name. The person who was not there was you. So please don't talk to me about what happens when I really need help. I know exactly what that looks like. I've already seen it." They left without saying anything else. The door closed quietly behind them. Colin's footsteps on the stairs, then Nadia's, then the street door. Harriet reached across and put her hand over mine. Neither of us said anything for a moment. The weeks after that were difficult in the way that honest things are often difficult. Some mornings I woke up and reached for my phone to call my daughter the way I always had, out of habit, out of hope, before I remembered that the daughter I was reaching for was not the one who existed. Some version of her had lived in my imagination for years. The real one had shown me who she was, slowly, and then all at once, and I had kept explaining it away. I sold the house in February. The Norway maple was bare when the for sale sign went up, its branches against the winter sky like something hand-drawn. The sale closed in 3 weeks. It went for more than I'd expected, which would have felt good once and now just felt like information. I found a 2-bedroom apartment on the south end of Guelph, 5 minutes from the food bank, 10 minutes from the Speed River Trail on a bus route, so I wouldn't need the car every day. The second bedroom was for Aidan when he visited. I bought a desk for it and a bookshelf, and a duvet in his favorite color, which was orange, a fact I knew because I had been paying attention all along. Harriet and her daughter helped me move. We made 3 trips in a rented van. Jester the cat supervised from his carrier and expressed his opinion of the disruption throughout. I gave the kitchen table to Paulette because she'd admired it once years ago and I thought she'd use it well. Moving day was the hardest, not because of the lifting, because when you close the door on a house for the last time, the air inside it is 37 years of your life, and you carry some of that with you and you leave some of it there, and you don't get to choose which is which. But when I walked into the apartment for the first time, boxes stacked in the empty rooms, light coming through windows, I didn't know yet. Chester finally let loose from his carrier and immediately getting lost behind the radiator, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, the particular feeling of a life that is still ahead of you. My daughter did not contest the will. Miss Obi had told her she could try, and she told her what it would cost and what it would yield and what the neuropsychological evaluation attached to every page meant for her chances. Nadia was, whatever else she was, practical. 3 months after the move, there was a knock at my apartment door on a Saturday afternoon. I opened it, and my grandson was standing in the hallway in his hockey gear, helmet in his hand, face still pink from the rink. Harriet was behind him, looking both nervous and satisfied in the way she gets when she's done something she thinks is right. "Hi, Grandma," Aidan said. "Can I have lunch? We just won." I opened the door all the way and stepped back. "I'll make you anything you want," I said. He walked past me into the apartment and immediately asked about Chester, and within 3 minutes he was lying on the living room floor with Chester on his chest, telling me about the game in that slightly exaggerated way 10-year-olds tell stories, the saves more dramatic than they were, the goals more beautiful. I stood in the kitchen making grilled cheese and tomato soup, listening to my grandson talk. He visits most Saturdays now. Harriet coordinates with him directly. What his parents know or have been told, I don't ask, and Harriet doesn't offer. Aidan is 10 years old and knows his own mind and knows where his grandmother lives and knows she will always open the door. That's enough. That's more than enough. In April, I signed up for a week-long watercolor workshop at the Guelph Arts Council. Frank had always said I should try painting, and I'd always said I didn't have time. I have time now. I'm not very good, but there is a particular pleasure in being a beginner at something at 66, in having a thing you're just learning to do. There's a woman in the class named Odette, 72, originally from Quebec City, who paints with total confidence and incorrect technique and results that are joyful and strange. We have coffee after every session. She's become a friend. People ask me if I regret it. The will, the sale, the distance with my daughter. The honest answer is that I don't regret protecting myself. I don't regret what I gave to the people who gave to me. But I grieve what I expected. I grieve the version of my daughter I had carried in my mind for decades, the one who would drive through the night if I needed her. She wasn't that person. Maybe she never was. I just stopped making excuses long enough to see it clearly. There's a phrase in French that my mother used to say, Elle a fait son deal. She has grieved it and moved on. You can grieve something and still be all right. You can grieve someone who is still alive. I walk every morning now. The Speed River Trail, the same route Frank and I used to walk on weekends. In the winter, the ice breaks up in chunks along the banks and makes sounds like something shifting and resettling, which I find I don't mind. I walk, and I think, and I come home to Chester and my orange doof spare room and the paintings I am slowly and badly making. Last week, Aidan brought me a drawing he'd done at school. A house in crayon, a woman standing in front of it, a large orange-yellow blob at her feet, meant to be Chester. In wobbly letters at the bottom, my grandma's new house. It's on the refrigerator at eye level. If you're listening to this and something in it sounds familiar, I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me sooner. You are allowed to stop explaining their behavior to yourself. You are allowed to stop being grateful for the bare minimum and start expecting what you actually deserve. The people who love you will show up, not when it's convenient, not when there's something to gain. They'll show up on a Tuesday night with a rented van, or in November cold with a Tim Hortons cup gone cold beside your hospital bed, or in hockey gear at your door asking if there's lunch. Those are your people. I have a small apartment, a cat who tolerates me, a 10-year-old who visits on Saturdays, a woman named Odette who paints like she's arguing with the canvas, and a physio-approved walking route along a river that has been running through this town a great deal longer than any of my troubles. I also registered this spring for a guided watercolor tour in the Annapolis Valley, Nova Scotia. Frank always wanted to see the Bay of Fundy. I'm going to see it for both of us. I'm not looking backward anymore. There isn't anything back there I haven't already made my peace with. The bath mat is still in a bag somewhere in my storage locker. I never threw it out, and I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe because the fall itself wasn't the real thing that happened that November. The real thing was what I found out afterward, lying in a hospital bed while the monitors beeped and Harriet slept in the chair beside me. What I've come to understand is that the way things ended wasn't accidental. It was the result of a long chain of choices, mine and Nadia's both. For years, I chose to look away from the signs. I chose the comfortable explanation over the true one. That's not a character flaw exactly. It's what people do when they love someone and the alternative is too painful to sit with. But those choices had consequences. They kept me soft in a situation that required me to be clear-eyed. And eventually, the truth arrived whether I was ready or not, in the form of a checked box on an intake form and a postmark dated 9 days before I fell. There's something I keep coming back to. Harriet didn't drive up from Hamilton because she owed me anything. By any reasonable accounting, I had already given her more than enough. The extra shifts, the coloring books, the graduations, 22 years of showing up. She came because she had the kind of character that treats loyalty as something you carry forward, not something you pay back and close the account on. That's a rare thing. I didn't fully understand how rare until I was on the other side of needing it. And that's the part I want to be honest about, because I think it's easy to watch a story like mine and see it as being about the people who let you down. It's not really. It's about what happens when you finally decide to see your own life clearly and then do something about it. That decision, to call Ms. Obi, to get the evaluation, to sit down in that conference room and say the true things out loud, that didn't come from anger. It came from a kind of hard-won steadiness. The understanding that I had spent 31 years as a nurse making careful decisions under pressure, that I had raised a child and buried a husband and kept going, and that I was not, in fact, someone who needed to be managed. Knowing that about yourself is not the same as being sure of it on a bathroom floor at 7 in the morning. Getting there takes something. It takes paying attention to the evidence in front of you even when you'd rather not. It takes being willing to be wrong about the story you've been telling yourself. And it takes the willingness to act on what you now know, even when acting on it is the harder thing. I think about Aidan on Saturday mornings, hockey gear and all, asking about Chester before he's even taken his shoes off. He didn't choose this situation. He was handed it by the adults around him. What I can give him is consistency. The door that opens, the grilled cheese, the grandmother who is still here and still paying attention. Whether that shapes anything in him down the road, I can't say. But I believe it matters that someone in his life shows him what it looks like to keep your word, to show up without being asked, to treat people as worth the trouble. That's the only thing I know how to pass on now. Not advice. Just the example of a person who finally stopped shrinking, looked at her own life honestly, and decided she wasn't done with it yet. The Bay of Fundy trip is booked for September. I've never traveled alone before. I find I'm looking forward to it.